but we're not doing it for health. We're doing it because we want to be a 300-pound bodybuilder.
If somebody's main concern was longevity and health, then they should probably not take steroids.
How did we meet? All right. So me and Shane met on a very esoteric part of the internet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know. I don't even know who we met through. Maybe it was Evan or something, Evan's Instagram, or like Evan Rutledge, or
no, it was just through your Instagram. I just found you randomly.
Yeah.
Or it might have been a bigger account shared something of yours.
Yeah, probably.
Jailhouse or something like that.
And then we built like quite a network of dudes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That was 2021, 2022, something like that.
Yeah, forever ago, man. So obviously I'm a strength coach. I've been doing this for a while. You're a strength coach. You have your own, fitness transformation you've gone through. Our styles of fitness, there's a lot of overlap. There is some difference. And so I just thought it would be a good idea for us to do this kind of Q&A thing. Our audience has asked us a bunch of questions for the sake of getting a different perspective on fitness, essentially. Now, the one big overlap that we do have is most of our clients are similar demographics. So, typically dads, 30s, 40s, limited schedule, guys that want to obviously get lean, get more muscular. But for both of our demographics, physique is a consideration, but it's not the primary consideration. Right. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah.
So most of the guys that I train historically have been more in like the tactical space, and obviously there's a lot of guys that aren't, but a lot of the guys that I coach are police, firemen, military, and then obviously there's all sorts of stuff in between, and guys just work regular desk jobs. What are like the vast majority of your clients?
Yeah, basically the same thing. Dads, fathers trying to get in shape. I think it obviously the type of content you post draws a certain type of person in. So, I post mostly like strongman-y type, training exercises, stuff like that. So, I get a lot of people who are just like fans of the sport of strongman. But, all the other stuff is basically the same. It's just dudes in their, late 20s, 30s, 40s who, typically have young families who, a lot of times, when they started having families is when they kind of started letting stuff go. Maybe they've been out of the military for a few years, or, they have busy jobs and, they started having kids, and then, kind of the fitness and the diet stuff kind of fell off. So I think a lot of it is like kind of reframing the mindset of, a lot of times you talk to guys and the reason they want to like get in shape and be physically strong is like, because of having kids and being a father and like the roles obviously that are associated with that. But then they'll use those as exact same reasons as why they're in the position they're in, right? It's like, because I have kids, because I don't have time, because of this and that is also the reason they want to get in shape, but it's the same exact excuse why they're not in shape, why they're in the position they're in. So it's like kind of reframing, how we talk about that type of stuff, so very closely aligned with the type of guys that you're into. I work with, some strength athletes, some combat athletes like, MMA, stuff like that. But, the large majority of them is just guys who let themselves go at some point.
Well, the funny thing about this whole deal is that you and I both have kids. Mm-hmm. We both have jobs. I mean, I have other companies that I run, but when I was training, or like most of the time that I've been training, I've had other full-time jobs. Mm-hmm. You've got a full-time job. And so what's funny to me is when people message me and they're like, I want to get in shape for my kids or whatever. But then they talk about how, that's the imposition to them training. It's like, well, do you look at my page and see that I have kids too? Like I don't understand that excuse. You're sitting here looking at the fact that I have kids and I have all these companies I run. And you're sitting here telling me, well, it's hard for me to get to the gym because I got kids. As if that's like unrelatable to me, right. Or as if everybody that I train doesn't have kids or a full-time job. Like, what do you expect me to say? Like, oh, well, I didn't know you weren't a full-time college student. So I guess, yeah, you're right. That's why you can't train. And I think what it comes down to a lot of the times is that a lot of times guys want us to validate their excuses for why they can't do it. And so, and that's for a lot of things. It's not just fitness, right? It's also, cause I also do business consulting, and it's the same way with making money. A lot of guys will say the reason I can't start a business is because I'm too busy, this and that, or I don't know how, or I don't have any startup money. It's like, dude, I did all this stuff with zero money, $0. And so I think a lot of people, they just want to make some kind of excuse, and it drives me nuts. And I think another thing that I kind of recently realized was that a lot of people, a lot of men, especially these days, they don't want to be uncomfortable. And I was kind of like ranting about this to another coach friend, and I was talking about how, I talk to guys in the DMs, and they'll be talking to me for like days at a time about their problems with fitness. And then suddenly when I ask them to get on a call with me, they'll like ghost me and they'll leave me unread. And I was like, man, it just drives me. There's just something about it that makes me disgusted when that happens. And, part of it is I think they're not being direct. So if you're going to tell me, if you want to sit here and say like, I don't want to train with you because I don't like you, or I don't want to change, that's fine. Just say that. But leaving somebody on red, I think is just such like just like viscerally grosses me out when a man isn't direct. But this guy put it really good. He said, I think the reason that it bothers you so much is because it's that these men aren't willing to go through any level of discomfort. They're not willing to experience any discomfort for the sake of accomplishing anything. And I was like, that really is it. Because what I realized was that, the other thing that happens, and you can relate to this from a business perspective, is when I send somebody up for training and they agree to the price and they say everything's good to go, and they agree to the schedule and all that kind of stuff, and I'm walking through the setup process, I'll tell them, okay, I'm going to send you 3 documents. One of them is going to be the waiver. One of them is going to be the payment link for you to sign up, for you to actually pay for coaching. And the third one is going to be my onboarding form. And I'll send them this, and they'll complete the waiver, and they'll complete the onboarding form, and then they won't complete the payment. And then I have to text them later and say, hey, I got these 2 forms. Did you do the payment? And they'll text me an hour later, and they'll say, oh yeah, I'm going to do it here in a second. And then like I'll text them again, and then they'll do it. And it's like, why didn't you just do it right then? And I think, again, like why it bothers me so much, it's not about them paying me. It's definitely about just them not being willing to do the uncomfortable part of that, which is paying. And it's an allegory for what's going to happen when you train, because you don't want to do the uncomfortable thing right now, which is pay, which means that tomorrow you're not going to want to do the uncomfortable thing, which is getting home from work and changing into your gym clothes. So what it comes down to is like, are you willing to do the thing that just takes a little bit of effort for like 1 second? So that's kind of just the thing that bothers me the most, I think, is men in our community who are unwilling to experience any level of discomfort for achieving something. And the thing that's really fucked up about it that I think is these men are in charge of families. So you're supposed to be leading your family, but the example that you're setting is, well, when something's difficult or uncomfortable, dad puts it off. And isn't that your whole problem with fitness? And that's why fitness and all this stuff and like the cold shower that I have guys do every morning, like all this little stuff is a catalyst for improving everything else in your life and your ability to be a father and a family man. Because if you can get off the couch and go to the gym, if you can get up first thing in the morning and hop in that cold shower and be uncomfortable, that then is going to bleed over into every other aspect of your life, to where now there's something uncomfortable that you need to do, for your family or whatever, or at your work or whatever it is, and you're going to be more likely to do it. And so it's a personality thing, and the fitness is just a sign of that. That your lack of fitness is simply a sign that you are not somebody who's willing to be uncomfortable. Yeah. So it's got nothing to do with time. It's got nothing to do with having time. It's got everything to do with you're just not willing to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, and a lot of guys are scared to make the change. They're like they're not scared because the change is hard. Like typically the change is pretty easy. It's simple. They're just afraid of whatever they have to give up. They're afraid of whatever that like. They're afraid of something they've like built into their head that's way bigger than what it actually is. I think like over time you build like rapport with these people, and you can have a relationship with them where you can call them out on stuff like that. I think a lot of times these people just like lack somebody like that in their life.
Exactly.
For like,
which is why they're supposed to be signing up for training.
100%.
Because once you get somebody in, like once I get somebody in, it's smooth sailing. Like I have a great compliance rate.
Right.
The guys just always get stuck at this, like right before I take the leap stage. But pretty much everybody that I sign up, like they're paying me to stay on top of them. It's just like you just have to decide to hop in the cold shower. You just have to decide to do the payment. You just have to decide to get on the call. That one little thing, and then I can take you to that next level, and I can stay on top of you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like as men, we're like designed to hold each other accountable. It's like that's what we do for each other. But we're so atomized now that a lot of guys just don't have that, or have never had that in their life, or they've had somebody that has held them accountable to a higher standard, and they're just complacent in comfort, and they just kind of get stuck in this cycle of just doing things that they're comfortable with doing, and making a big change, which this necessarily isn't need to be a big change. It's pretty straightforward and simple. It's just scary. They've just built it up in their head, like, oh man, I'm going to have to get up, early, or I'm going to have to, do something after work rather than, sit on the couch and, binge watch some Netflix show and eat donuts or whatever.
Yeah. That is a really good point about the atomization thing. The community, the lack of community. That's why I have the path, that 10-day challenge and the Telegram chat. And like you and I used to be in a Telegram chat way back in the day. And how many guys came into that chat, like, and their life was totally off track. And then by virtue of seeing all the guys in there that were squared away and us holding them accountable, how many of those guys changed? I mean, there's a lot of guys that you and I know that have absolutely turned their lives around because of, I mean, yourself included.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And a large part of that was the community around it, just like, I don't know, peer pressure or whatever you want to call it. It's super valuable. It's a very valuable tool, a powerful tool, that, really, takes you to that next level. Like surrounding yourself with people that you want to emulate. It's really no different than being a father, right? Because you want to be the example for your kids, for your sons. You should, be actively surrounding yourself with people that you want to emulate. And, like the lone wolf thing, like accomplishing things on your own, like that doesn't work. Like that's not real. Like that's, Hollywood BS. There's very rarely is a man, out there on his own doing something, life changing like that. Like it takes a team, it takes a community, it takes people holding you accountable. It takes, people leading as examples. And, yeah, we really lack that, in a lot of areas of our life. A lot of people have, they don't have the opportunity, or they just don't, work in a field, where it's, a lot of camaraderie. Like, they're not working in the military. They're not working in a first responder or something like that. And so they just don't ever have the opportunity to like really push themselves. There's no like competition, right? Competing, in like a friendly, fun way, but also in, like that's super valuable as well. Like just competing with, people around you, that's like where like sports came from, obviously, that's, ingrained within us. That's something that I think we should all be striving to, push ourselves and comparing ourselves to others. And that's a big part of it. Like the trope is like, don't compare yourself to others. That's weak and gay. Like you should absolutely be comparing yourself to everyone around you. Like that's how you get better. Like that's the whole point. Go ahead.
The people that you surround yourself with end up being what you hold as the standard, no matter what. And right. So even if it's not peer pressure and a structured way of holding somebody accountable, simply by virtue of being around people who are a certain way, you do end up becoming that way. Because whether you like it or not, humans are social creatures. Whether you pretend like, oh, I'm antisocial, I don't like people, all these stupid goofball millennial memes. Mm-hmm. Yes, you do. You emulate people. And yeah, iron sharpens iron. Your tribe is your worth. Whatever, all that. It's all true. It's all 100% true. Mm-hmm. And that actually leads me to a good question I want to ask you, because you compete in strongman. Is competing something that you drive your clients toward as a way to like give them something to achieve?
Almost all of them, yeah. It doesn't have to be a strength sport. It doesn't have to be strongman. But that is a typical request I make, is that they sign up for something like once a year. And it can be whatever. I really don't care. It can be a half marathon. It can be a strongman competition. It can be something local. It can be arm wrestling. It doesn't matter to me at all. I'd like for it to be physical, obviously, because that's, what I'm doing for you is physical. But I see a lot of value in putting like something on a timeline, having like a deadline for something. It kind of gives you just like another gear to tap into in your training. There's like a little bit of extra motivation that you get when like, hey, I need to be ready for this specific thing by this day. So I really do try to, I don't make it a requirement, but I try to push everybody to sign up for something. A lot of times they end up just like really falling in love with whatever it is they sign up for, and then it becomes a little bit more, it's still a hobby. Like nobody's making money, competing at local strongman events. But I think it's more than a hobby because I think really as men, we are kind of designed to compete with each other. And, when you go to a gym, it's really not that hard to be the biggest, strongest guy in some like local gym, right? Like you bench 315 at a gym. It's like people are like watching you. It's like, guys, 315 is not that impressive. I mean, yeah, it's a big number, but, then you go to like, some sort of strength competition and, compare yourself with people who, train this stuff seriously. And you're like very quickly the top at your gym to like the, weakest person at the competition. So it kind of puts you in perspective of like, okay, what is really possible, with my training? So yeah, I mean, I think that's like the really big takeaways is, it's on a deadline. So you have to, kind of be on track. So you have like an increased compliance with training and diet and stuff like that for, a short period of time, which is cool. So like whatever your prep phase is, 8 weeks or 10 weeks or something like that, you get like really, really good compliance out of the athlete during that time, which I think is, valuable. You get, a really good comparison, like the day of. You get to see like, okay, I thought I was really good. Turns out I really wasn't that good. And then afterwards, when you've actually like, trained for something really hard and then competed, you do get like another, rush of motivation, right? Because it's like you had this work that you put in, outcome. Okay, now where do we go from here? Because, there's obviously things that I lacked. There's things that I did really good on. So there's like that 3-step thing that you get out of a competition that I find a lot of value in.
Yeah. It's like a benchmark.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of guys that compete in tactical games. Like a lot of the guys that I train that are shooters, but we're training just for fitness. I recommend to them like, hey, sign up for a tactical games event because it blends everything that you want to do. And you don't have to show up, thinking that you're going to win, because a lot of the times people's hesitation for doing events is like, well, I'm not at that top level, so I'm not going to get first. It's like, oh, so you should only compete if you're going to take first place in the advanced division. But like, you remember that strongman event that we did in North Carolina? We had like, 15 guys from our group chat all showed up to this strongman event. It was crazy. And a lot of those guys, it was their first time. They had never done stones. They had never done axle bar, any of that stuff. And they showed up and they had fun. And a lot of those guys ended up getting into strongman. But regardless, it was just a great thing for them to train for. And it was a way for them to push themselves to that next level. And it was fun. Like the fucking group was fun, dude. Like we stayed at the Airbnbs. Like it was awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I think strongman specifically, because that's what I know. There's like a lot of camaraderie and good sportsmanship involved within the sport. It's very family oriented. Everybody brings their families and everybody has coolers and, it's like a fun, right? So that's really why, I like strongman so much. But, just the event, the competition itself is valuable for networking, for meeting other people that are about the same thing that you're about. Cause it's rare that you meet people in real life that, outside of like, going out of your way to meet people that are about your thing. Like you don't just randomly meet somebody at the grocery store who's like, oh yeah, I just love strongman. Like that's super, super, super rare. But
well, and as a man, you don't meet people that are squared away. Like
exactly.
And that's why these online communities are so awesome because the average man is such a freaking loser bump on a log.
Yeah.
That's why like Instagram has been such a great networking tool for us and these Telegram group chats and that kind of stuff. So we can, because maybe 50 years ago, it was a lot easier to find guys that were more go-getters, but now the majority of guys you meet are freaking losers, man. So you have to you got to seek out the homies online.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's just like an opportunity for 100 of those guys to be in the same place on the same day. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which I think
dangerous.
is awesome.
Dangerous for Israel. They don't like us getting together.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into some of these audience questions here. The first one that I have is best rep ranges for building muscle What is the best rep range for building muscle? And this is one that I hear a lot, and I'm sure that you do too. Do you want to start off, or you want me to start off?
Yeah.
Isn't it hard to answer these questions because we're at such like an advanced level that it's hard to distill it down?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like the common thing is like anywhere between like 5 and 30, right? That's what everybody says. I typically just like lean more to like, what are you going to try harder at? Like, what do you enjoy training? Like, do you really like heavy triples? Well, if you really like heavy triples, like you're probably going to put more effort into heavy triples than you are like sets of 30. Like if you hate volume training, then you're not going to try hard enough to like get the adaptation that we're looking for to like give your body the stimulus. You know, we understand that like hypertrophy comes from like probably getting close to failure, right? That's like generally, you know, how you
that's what all the research shows. It's just approaching failure.
Right. So like if you hate training to 30, like that sucks to get to failure at 30 reps. Like that's a really hard set. Getting close to failure with like 3s or 5s is not hard at all. You know, it's like if that's what you enjoy, then you're probably going to be on your way to the gym, like stoked about hitting a top set of 5 today. And you're going to be like the night before up in bed thinking about like, oh man, am I going to get 335 for my set of 5 tomorrow? Like that amount of like energy that you put into that totally offsets like whatever is optimal. Like doesn't matter what's optimal. What matters is the work that you put in. So it's like if you enjoy something more, you're going to put more work and effort and energy into that, and you're going to get more out of it.
No one's going to bed thinking, I hope I get 27 reps at 115 tomorrow. That's really exciting. No one's going to get excited about that. But one of the things that I think about, and yeah, it is clear that, you know, Schoenfield's research, right? It's like the hypertrophy rep range is anywhere between whatever, like 3 and 30 reps. Well, something you got to consider is, and it has to be close to failure. That's the big thing. That's the only thing that matters. Okay. So if we're talking about these higher rep ranges, we're much less likely to stop that set because we're actually at muscular failure, and we're much more likely to stop because it burns. Mm-hmm. And so that's the thing that I'm always thinking about when thinking about higher rep ranges, past like 8 to 12 or something, is a lot of times that set is going to end up stopping because it's just the lactic acid buildup, and so you're not actually even going to be able to achieve muscular failure. Mm-hmm. So it's got to be like a little bit lower of a rep range. But as you know, as we both know, like the biggest driver of hypertrophy is going to be approaching failure, and then progressive overload, progressing the exercises over time. So what's going to allow us to do that? And then obviously with the big, more compound lifts, you're going to work in the lower rep ranges. I'm not going to do a 3 rep max lateral raise because that's not, I'm not really going to be able to perform or progressively overload that. Because something else we have to think about is, okay, like, how can I progressively overload let's just say something stupid like a 5 rep max dumbbell lateral raise? Well, I'm not going to be able to add 5 pounds every single time because 5 pounds on my lateral raise is like 30% of my max. Mm-hmm. On a deadlift, I could easily add 5 pounds over the course of weeks. So, with some of these more isolation exercises, we're going to maybe work in a higher rep range, and maybe we'll have we'll do a double progression. So, hey, you're going to go 8 to 12 reps. Once you're able to achieve 12 reps, then we're going to go up in weight back to 8, and then we just climb through that again like that. And yeah, that's my opinion. Just, yeah, like you said, like what's going to make you work the hardest and get close to failure? And then from a physiological standpoint, like, are we actually even going to be able to achieve failure before we just stop because it burns so freaking bad? Or we're not even putting the intensity in because we're doing 30 reps and now we're thinking about, what's for lunch or something. We're getting bored and less intense.
Yeah. I mean, it's like if you're somebody who likes to logbook their training, where it's like that one more rep this week makes you happy. Sure, do that, but there's plenty of people who have built phenomenal physiques with not even doing like real gym lifts like that. Like they train with odd implements. They train with sandbags. They train with kettlebells, stuff like that. They've built phenomenal physiques, and you can't logbook a sandbag, right? It's just like, you can't do one more foot carry this week than you did last. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So it's, it comes down to, effort really more than anything. It's like if you, and you come into sessions, with different, fatigue, different, a lot of it depends on, what you ate that day or the day before, or what you trained the day before. So if you come in more fatigued, okay, you didn't get the one more rep that you needed this week to logbook that exercise to beat the logbook. That doesn't mean you didn't get a good stimulus out of the exercise, right? You can get a very good stimulus without hitting the next, level. You know what I mean? You know, that's like how bodybuilders train, right? Like the majority of them, they just try to reach close to failure. It doesn't really matter if failure this week was 12 reps and failure next week was 10 reps. You know, like if they came into shoulder press and, you know, the previous day they did something that fatigued a main driver of that movement and they got less reps, it doesn't mean they worked less hard. It doesn't mean they got less adaptation out of that work. So yeah, I mean, like auto regulation obviously is a big part of that. So I don't know. It's like log booking your training, I think is fine for, like you said, something like a lateral raise, right? Doesn't make a lot of sense for, you know, other stuff. You know, you gotta just think about like, you know, putting the effort in, just putting the work in, you know, just like pushing yourself hard. That's, you know, what it comes down to.
This is actually good because this actually might be something that we disagree on slightly, which is good because I don't want this whole thing to just be us like glazing each other.
Yeah.
So my whole thing with the law, well, my thing is this. Okay. So let's say I did 12 reps on something last week and this week I was only able to get 10. In my opinion, it wasn't a good stimulus because I'm already adapted for that 12. Maybe there's some other things that are happening physiologically. But to me, when it comes to like making long-term progress and objectively seeing us making progress over time, I think that the logbook is an important way for us to see that happening. But I mean, yeah, maybe you're right. Like maybe the quality of contraction was better this week and that's why you only got 10 and then you do get that stimulus. But we have to be able to like measure and track something so that we know generally if we are making some sort of progress. And so what I'll tell my guys to do, because I agree with you that your body is not static. So yeah, maybe you got less rest this week, so you're not going to be able to hit those 12 reps. I try to teach my guys autoregulation and as much as possible, adjusting the training on the fly. And one of the ways that I do it, for instance, is like if we're talking about like a heavy squat or something, I always tell guys this. If you get up to like, let's say 70% of your max and you notice like the bar speed is super slow and it's just not moving and it's just, you're not going to hit that heavy triple today. You're not going to hit a heavy triple PR. Then I'll give them like an option B of doing like some volume based work. So there is something that we can improve on that week. And that way we're actually able to make some kind of PR, almost like conjugate style, where it's like we're going to try to PR something every session, whether it is weight or it is volume or it is an eccentric and it's focused on better muscular contractions, or maybe we're shortening the rest periods. And obviously this is easier as coaches in person because I can see that athlete doing the thing and then I can tell them right away, hey, this is what you need to do. Yep. And that is a limitation with online training, is that, hey, if that guy's in the gym and the bar's moving shitty, how's he going to know what to do? So the more advanced athlete you get, obviously, the better they're going to be able to do that. But yeah, I'm also big on the logging because I think it gamifies the training a little bit. And so one of the big pieces of feedback that I get that helps guys stay on track is they actually see things improving week to week. And so it helps people stay a little bit more compliant. But also I'm a little bit OCD. And so, and I'm not the biggest guy. I'm pretty jacked, but I'm not the biggest. Maybe I would be bigger if I was, training a little bit more just on vibes and perceived intensity. But something that really helps keep me on track, being an autistic internet dork, is, having everything perfect like that. But at the same time, I won't limit myself. Like if I have if I'm supposed to do a set of 12 and I'm feeling good, I'll go 13, 14, 15 reps or something. I'm not going to like stop this set short on purpose. Yeah. So it just depends on the athlete, I guess.
Yeah. I think it depends on the athlete. It depends on, the exercise, like really is like the biggest thing. Like I think logbooking, especially, single joint movements is fairly consistent. Like your biceps not going to be that much more fatigued this week than it was last week. If your, training week looks about the same. So yeah, logbooking, accessories, I think is fine if that's what makes your brain happy, right? The majority of the time when I'm programming accessories, it's like, hey, I just want 3 hard working sets where you fail somewhere between 12 and 15.
Sure.
Like pick a weight and fail between 12 and 15 reps or 15 and 20 or whatever it is. And maybe we keep that accessory in for, 3 or 4 weeks and you just give me 3 or 4 really hard working sets for 3 or 4 weeks. I think there's zero possibility of that hard work being wasted. Like it's not like you got nothing out of that accessory. Now there's accessories that you use for specific reasons. So if it's like positioning, like you're trying to improve a position on a compound lift or, you're trying to target a weakness or something like that. But most of the accessories, it's like we really just are looking for just like building the engine. We're just looking for a bigger muscle. Whatever muscle we're targeting, we're just trying to make that bigger so that when you go to do the compound exercise, you have a bigger muscle to work with. So if you give me 3 hard working sets that are close to failure, that I'm happy with that. I don't care what the number is. I don't care what the weight is. Just try really hard. Like you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong with that.
No, I agree. And there's other things to think about other than reps too, right? Like the range of motion, like getting a full stretch, all that kind of stuff. Those are all going to be drivers for hypertrophy too.
Yeah.
And, because you're programming a lot of strongman style stuff, there are so many factors with the execution of the exercise to where maybe you just didn't get your hand under the sandbag the same way. And so it's not going to look the same on paper. And that's kind of one of the reasons that I like to do a lot of machine-based work with my athletes is because we're able to take some of those variables out of it of the balance and all that kind of crap. I mean, obviously I do that stuff. We still do a lot of that, quote, functional type stuff. But that is one of the reasons why I'm a huge fan of the machines is because we can get a little bit more accurate with the data tracking. So yeah, I guess it's a little bit of a nuanced discussion.
Yeah, I guess something I didn't mention earlier when we were talking about like what our like main audience or client base is like the majority of my guys are home gym people.
Right.
The large majority of them. So it's like machine access is fairly limited. And that's a big consideration when you're working with free weights is like, hitting muscular failure on a machine is a much simpler process than, on some sort of free weight exercise. Like you can give somebody goblet squats instead of hack squats, but it's like reaching muscular failure on a goblet squat is not the same as reaching muscular failure on a hack squat. Like it's the same movement essentially, right? You're just like big, knee bend, extreme quad tension. But it's like you have to balance when you're doing a goblet squat, right? You don't have to balance on a hack squat. You can really push really, really hard on a hack squat. So yeah, and it's like just takes more brain power to do that. It doesn't take any brain power to hurt yourself on a hack squat. So yeah, there's a lot of considerations when you're working with home gym people, which is cool. I enjoy that part of it because I'm like a home gym guy too. It's fun to come up with those like workarounds, try to figure out like how are we gonna like this guy has a rack and a barbell, like what are we gonna do with this guy? It's fun to like make those programs.
Yeah. No, that is true. And I also do a lot of free weight type stuff as well, regardless if they have a home gym or not. But one of the reasons too that I like machines is because it allows us to get work done and tax a specific muscle without having some of that more systemic fatigue. So in an ideal situation, you have machines too, because like even like, let's say I want to get my quads stronger, if I'm doing a back squat, say, well, are my quads really the thing that is going to tire out first? Or like if I'm doing a goblet squat, are my quads going to be the limiting factor? Well, I want the muscle that I'm targeting to be the limiting factor, which is why those machines can be useful. And like you said, a bigger muscle is a stronger muscle. So if I have an athlete whose sticking point in the back squat is their quads, I have to figure out the best way to get their quads up. And if you're at a home gym, you got to get a little bit creative with doing, front squats or zerchers or pin variations or, maybe sissy squats or something like that. And the machines are good because they allow us to really create a lot of local fatigue without creating a lot of that more, systemic, like, oh, I can't get out of bed fatigue.
Yeah. Yeah. You're 100% right. And I think the squat is like the biggest example of that, where it's like more often than not, it's going to be limited by low back. And it's like from a home gym perspective, like there's not a lot of options for training your legs that don't involve your low back.
Mm-hmm.
So like having leg machines is probably one of the biggest investments you can make.
100% agreed. 100% agree.
If you can get like a leg extension, leg curl combo or a belt squat is like a phenomenal, I mean, they're expensive, but a belt squat would be a phenomenal home gym piece. If you could like fit a big hack squat, that would be cool. But it's like, you have to find a way to, like you said, train your quads, but take your low back and balance out of the equation. And like, how do you do that with free weights? Is like really no way.
Yeah, it's tough. And that, when I have a client who has a home gym and they're talking about like, well, I want to build out my home gym, I always tell them like, hey, I will help you build out your home gym with the highest leverage equipment, considering the space and the budget that you have. And so it's like, hey, don't go out and just buy random stuff. Let's think about like what's going to be the most bang for our buck. Like you said, a leg extension, a hamstring curl. I'm a really big fan of those like plate loaded like double cable pulley lat pull down things, because you can get one on Marketplace for like $200, and there's like a million things it opens up. But it's like, don't go out and buy a piece of equipment where you can only do one thing on it. Go out and buy a piece of equipment that allows us to do like 10 or 15 different exercises, save more time, save more money, or save space.
Yeah, you see people, they'll buy like the hammer strength like seated dip machine, and it takes up like 20 square feet, and it's like,
and there's one thing you can do on it.
What else can you do with that machine? Or it's like if you get a high pulley, low pulley, like some sort of cable tower thing, and then like leg machines, like then you have everything you need. You don't even need dumbbells. Like you really don't need dumbbells in a home gym. A good set of cables and a good, some sort of leg machine, I think is like really like the entry level into like upgrading your home gym past a barbell and a rack, obviously.
Sometimes one of the jokes that my assistant coach Keegan and I make is, we'll get a new client intake form and they're at a home gym, and we're like, all right, what equipment do you have available? I have a barbell with a 25 and a 10, and have a 13-pound dumbbell, and I have a 9 iron, and I have an old hose. Like, it's like some people, the stuff they list for the home gyms, it's like, dude, did you get this shit at a fucking auction? Like, yeah. And so it's like, I got to get so creative with what we're doing. So
they've been yard selling for a couple weeks.
Yeah. They're like, oh, I have a stack of Pokemon cards. Yeah. All right. Next question. As a police officer, how should my training be different than when I was just a gym bro?
Ooh. You go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, this kind of gets into the whole idea of like general physical preparedness versus like sport specific or job specific kind of training. I'll tell you this. There are, I guess, some considerations with what you need to be able to do to perform. But in general, we want you to get stronger, and we want you to be more cardiovascularly fit, and we want you to have better mobility, which is your ability to express strength at end ranges. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's the same for everybody, whether you're a cop or you're a grandma or you're a full-time college student or whatever it is. I mean, a stronger athlete is going to be a better athlete. And I don't think that the movements that you do necessarily have to mimic what you're doing in the field. That's why it's called general physical preparedness. Look, if you get somebody squat stronger, then, their legs stronger, they're going to be able to do all these different things with their legs. It doesn't have to be something where it's like the exact functional movement, right? Like I remember people used to say when CrossFit was big, I want to get my bar muscle ups up better so that I can like hop over fences better. It's like, why don't you just get your arms and shoulders and lats stronger, and then you'll be able to do it better. And then, yes, there is a skill portion, but you train the skill portion separately. Okay. So like I have that guy that I coach that's on the Raiders. When we're doing his training, it's all general. I don't have him do the exact thing he does on the field in the gym. He just gets stronger, faster, more mobile. And then he does the skill work where he expresses it. Or if I have someone who does jujitsu, I'm not like, okay, well, you got to put yourself in a choke. So you're going to put the band around your neck and you're going to choke yourself. And then you're going to get, right. We don't do that, right? We just get you stronger. We get you better conditioned so that then you're able to express the training skill, which you're doing at your training gym better. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think like exercise selection like barely changes at all. I think the intent during the exercise is like something that would change quite a bit. If you're training like a martial arts or MMA athlete or something like that, or maybe even like a field sport athlete, like explosiveness would be, a big consideration. Like if you're fielding, training, a wide receiver, or somebody like that, like obviously we want sprint speed to go up. And it's like, we're still going to squat, but maybe the intent behind the squat would be a little bit different than training a power lifter. I think you're exactly right. Like, the exercises we pick, like we have a good amount of, history on lifting weights. So it's like, we know like the back squat is like a pretty good reference for like lower body strength. And if you get your back squat higher, then more than likely your lower body strength is higher. That's going to translate, like regardless of what discipline it's translating into. Now, I think there is some consideration, like if you're training somebody who is a first responder and that's like kind of their main like reason for training, Like, is getting that person from a 500-pound squat to a 700-pound squat, like, going to make a big difference in their job? Like, probably not. So maybe it's like, okay, we're at a 500-pound squat. Like, maybe like we just need to work on our mile time and maybe like some agility stuff and like more athletic type stuff. So like maybe you would make considerations like that, but like if he's still going to squat once a week.
Yeah, there's going to be diminishing returns for certain stuff. Like,
the
getting
amount of work.
What's the risk to reward of taking taking a guy who's an MMA athlete from a 500 to a 600-pound squat? Is that going to make his MMA better, or is it just going to put him at more risk for injury?
Exactly,
and also more fatigue that we don't need to be placing on that athlete.
Yeah, because it takes way more to get from a 500 to a 700 than it did from him going from 300 to 500.
Exactly.
Like the amount of squat work he would have to do to get to 700 is infinitely more, and he would get zero return from it. Not zero, but not much.
Mm-hmm. So maybe considering those adaptations, like, okay, this guy has to be more explosive. We focus on more explosive stuff. But something that you touched on earlier that I liked was you said a bigger muscle has potential to be a stronger muscle. Mm-hmm. So even if we want that guy to be faster, it's still important for him to be able to have that maximal strength, because then he can express it with the explosiveness. Like when I wanted to get my clean up, one of the things that helped me get a better power clean was getting a heavier deadlift, because now when I did that power clean, the weight felt like nothing and I was able to move it quicker. But obviously I can't power clean my max deadlift.
Yeah, 100%. If you look at like how Olympic lifters deadlift, right? They're rarely grinding out deadlifts, and they deadlift very specifically. They deadlift with a flat back. They deadlift with their hips real low, like they would if they're going to go into a clean. It's like the intent behind the exercise is there. They're still deadlifting. We know that like deadlifting is like how to test your posterior, right? So, like the deadlift doesn't change. You don't have them do some goofy Bosu ball banded kettlebell swing, right? Because he's like wants to be a functional firefighter or whatever. Like you still have them deadlift, but like maybe the intent would change. The intent behind the exercise. So like maybe the execution changes slightly. Like a sprinter obviously would squat differently, would deadlift differently. It's like we still have these like, basic lifts that apply to everybody almost.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the execution changes because we want to, I guess maybe there is a sense where we want to mimic a certain movement pattern like a clean, and you're going to do it a little bit differently, or the effort level or the speed at which it's executed. So yeah. But for a general athlete, let's say a dad who just wants to get in better shape, maybe that doesn't have to be, we don't have to get as deep in the weeds with that.
No, not at all. No, I don't think so. No, that's more, probably training, like a competitive athlete type thing. Like strongman, squat is not typically a competitive lift, but almost every strongman squats, right? But that doesn't mean like it's not a valuable exercise, or that, training the squat for strongman, a lot of times we're training it to increase our overhead press, because leg drive is a big part of overhead press in strongman. So just having stronger, more explosive legs, like increasing the speed of your squat, has big carryover into your overhead press. So like grinding out max effort 1RM squats, is that going to increase your speed, on an overhead press? Probably not. So like the way you would train it maybe changes, but for the general population, squatting is probably just going to make you a better person. Honestly, doesn't matter.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. Dan John talks about when he was doing track and field. I think he was a thrower. After he got his squat above 400 pounds, from 400 to 500, or from like whatever 200 to 400, he noticed a linear improvement in his performance throwing the disc. From 400 to 500, zero improvement. So it's like the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. Yeah. And also, it's fair to say, like, not only did that puts you at more injury risk, but then also now we're taking, we're taking points out of our recovery bank for something that's not giving us a bang for our buck. So,
yeah, I love watching the way throwers train. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, they're very athletic.
I take a lot from their training. I think it's so like the explosive intent behind their training is really cool.
This will be a question that I think you'll really like, and this will be a fun one to answer. I'm on tier T. What is a good dose to take for a blast if I want to grow?
Well, probably the most important thing for growing is being healthy. So dose, dependent. Like you can make yourself pretty unhealthy pretty quickly, and it doesn't really matter how much you're taking at that point. If you're in a very inflamed state, you're probably not going to grow anything other than tumors or something. I don't know. But you need to be in a state of like your body wants to put muscle on. And if like, you're chronically fatigued and have a lot of systemic inflammation, you're probably not, and you're not sleeping good, stuff like that. Like you're probably not in a position to really grow a whole lot. So, to me, I think like, let's say you're on TRT, you're taking 200 or I don't know, 400 or, what most people take for TRT. I don't know what that is, but, I guess it depends. But, to me, I think a longer, cycle is going to yield better returns. So, blasting like a gram for 8 weeks versus like slowly working your way up to 1500, over the course of 20 weeks, I think is infinitely better. Right. So like just working your way up slowly, and just, work your way up when you need to, like the first thing should always be food. You should always be increasing your food if you're trying to grow. And then when you stop putting on muscle and you just start getting fat, like, okay, maybe then let's increase the drugs a little bit. That would be, a basic high level overview of like what my plan of action would be. If you're just going to do test only, then, stay at 200 and just, increase the calories a little bit. And then,
Agreed.
Reevaluate in a few weeks. And, if your body composition is going well, if you're changing in a good way, then just keep doing that. Like, why would you change anything if you're growing? And
I
then
agree.
when that stops working, you just, increase the food more and then increase the drugs a little bit more.
Yeah, this one really appeals to my nerd brain because I'm the same way, and I like to do things systematically like that, where we're measuring like what the actual result is. And I agree. Like, look, more medicine doesn't make you less sick, right? And you can only grow so much muscle mass at a time. So if I were to take a gram of test today versus 500 milligrams of test today, am I going to be bigger at the end of this week than I would be if I took 500? Of course not. Like muscle tissue accrual is going to be rate limited no matter what. So why not use the lowest effective dose so that we can run it longer and stay healthier, and then only increase it we need to? And you also got to consider like maybe there is some tolerance that happens. Like if you go to a gram right off the bat, well, it's like, now where do you go from there? And then, yeah, not only that, but like now your sleep sucks. Now you have all these side effects. And I think guys, a lot of the time they just want to go crazy and go hard out of the gate, but it's like, hey, just use the minimum effective dose. Like you said, crank up the food. And then once you are able, or once you, once maybe that, the gains start slowing down, whether the body composition starts to get a little bit fluffier, or, you're just not improving in the gym and it's not, and the training and the diet are not the issue, then we just make the next little bump by whatever, a couple hundred milligrams until we start to move that needle again. And now we can grow for the entire year instead of saying, oh, we grew for 3 months and we got our blood work looks like shit. And we have high blood pressure and now we have to back off. And it's like, how much muscle did you gain in 3 months anyways, no matter what freaking dose you're on? And that's also where compound selection comes into play too. If we're just talking about testosterone, that's one thing. But, the popular thing now is guys talk about running tren. And it's like, okay, well, you run tren as for a bulk and now you can't sleep. Well, you're not, I don't care, dude. You're not going to build any muscle no matter how much you run tren if you're not sleeping and you're not eating.
Yeah. And you're stressed out and you have anxiety constantly. And yeah. It's like there's two dials that people will figure out that work. And one obviously is increasing food. Just getting bigger will make you stronger really quick. And increasing drugs will make you stronger really quick. But it's like they'll find one of those and then they'll just crank that one to the max, right? They'll just fat fuck themselves into getting a little bit stronger. It's like, well, I put 100 pounds on my bench in a year. It's like, yeah, but you're like super fucking fat now. And now what? Like, now what do you do?
My favorite is when they're like, hey, I put 20 pounds on in 4 weeks. Oh yeah. Cause you cranked your carbs up to 1,000. You put 20 pounds of fat and water on, dude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's the same thing with food. Titrate it up slowly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. People will find like one dial that works really well and they'll just keep hammering that one lever. They'll just pull that one lever. It's like, there's so many different things we can do with our training, right? It's like we can mess around with frequency. We can mess around with volume. We can mess around with, whatever it is. But it's like, oh, I just got to take more drugs and I'll just get stronger. It's like, yeah, it'll work for a little bit.
The easy way out.
Yep.
Well, let me ask you this then. Okay. Let's say I'm a 35-year-old healthy normal male. I'm on 200 milligrams of TRT and I want to leverage testosterone in the right way to grow. What would be like your recommendation right off the bat of how I should change my dosing to just kick that off?
I like
See,
to do
I've been on TRT for 3 years.
Yeah, I like to do like 50% increases at a time. So if you're taking 200, I think 300 is the next logical step. And I think obviously blood work is a big part of it. Like, knowing, where your estrogen is and stuff like that obviously is important. But assuming your blood work is dialed in, you're working with somebody who's able to read your blood work and give you the right, recommendations to managing that stuff. I think 50% bumps is where you're at. So, if you're going for 200, 300, you ride 300 for as long as you can. You squeeze as much out of 300 as you can. And then you jump to 500, and you ride 500 for as much as you can. And while you're running the 500, you're changing other stuff, right? You're changing your food, you're changing your training. You're progressively overloading, like whatever it is. Or if you're going the other direction, you're trying to, get leaner. You're bringing your food down instead of, just adding drugs and keeping the food the same. And then from 500 to 750, and then from 750 to, whatever that is, 1200 or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I like that.
Yeah, at a certain point, like, you're going to figure out, like, okay, this is my tolerable max dose, right? This is like what I'm comfortable enough tolerating whatever side effects I'm dealing with at this dose. And you try to go above that because everybody will eventually try to go above that. And you figure out pretty quickly, that you're in a state of unhealthiness, that you're unable to recover from your training volume at that point. You're unable to get the food in because your digestion's messed up or whatever. And that, a lot of that depends on the compounds as well. Like, people will hammer like orals and then they just can't eat. And it's like, you're hammering like 80 milligrams of Anadrol every day, but you're not eating any food. Like, so what is the point of this?
Yep.
Like, you're just like destroying your organs and you're getting nothing out of it.
Yeah. You also got to think about too, like, what is the overall goal? I mean, look, there is nothing, I'm sure you would agree. There's a big difference between training for fitness in general and training for competition.
Mm-hmm.
And training to be a competitive athlete is by nature not healthy, but that's okay because the goal is not health. The goal is to win a gold medal. Like, I bet if you asked, Olympians, if, hey, you could win a gold medal right now, but you would die in 5 years. But a lot of them would take that bet. But,
yeah, all of them probably.
Yeah, because they've dedicated their lives to it. So we got to think, okay, well, maybe we want to achieve this goal, but we're going to take at least the healthiest way to achieve it, the most extent possible. But it is a reality that, hey, like, when it comes to, competing in powerlifting, a lot of people will say, this guy's on gear, he's going to die young, this and that. Well, it's like, I never heard that guy make the argument that he's doing this for health. Or somebody will say, well, you're doing all these heavy lifts. What's your back going to be like in 30 years? And it's like, well, I'm not doing this for my back health. I'm doing this to have a heavy squat because that's something that I want to achieve. And I think there actually is something really cool about that like Faustian European man, like, there's something that I want to accomplish, and that itself is virtuous. Wanting, dedicating your life to something, whether somebody else thinks it's a worthy goal or not. Because look, what's that saying? Like, I'd rather live, 50 years as a lion than 70 years as a sheep or something.
Mm-hmm.
And you just got to find out for you where that balance is. How much health or whatever longevity do you want to sacrifice for whatever this goal is? And that's how you make the determination of that. And it's like, yeah, I mean, you should probably drive your IGF-1 levels as low as possible, and you should restrict calories as much as possible, because those are the things that we know lead to the most longevity. But, you got to find that trade-off. And actually, that's a great point about just taking gear in general is, okay, everything is a risk to reward. Mm-hmm. When I cross the street, I'm taking a risk that I might die. But to me, that risk is small enough that it's offset by the reward of me getting to my destination. And so that's the personal determination that I've made about taking that risk. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be different for everybody. And so who am I to say that, taking gear and stuff or doing whatever or squatting super heavy all the time isn't worth it? Because it's like, your goal is different than mine and you're willing to risk more for that than I am. And everyone's got something different for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree.
So anyways, in the end, we recommend that you take as much Trenbolone as you can.
Yeah. Trenace. Yeah. As much as possible.
All right, let's get another question in here. raising a son, how to balance shielding them from the outside world while also preparing them for it. You want to kick that one off?
Yeah. I spent a lot of time thinking about like stuff like that. I have 4 sons. The oldest is about to be 7. So he's at an age now where, he's homeschooled, but if he was, going to school, he would be exposed to, like a lot of the modern world type stuff that kids are exposed to in school, whether that's like LGBTQ, whatever stuff, or trans stuff, or I don't know. Like there was an instance last year where like the school that he would be going to if he was going to school, they showed the kindergarten class the Super Bowl halftime show in class. And I didn't watch it, but I, obviously heard about like what it was. And it was, obviously quite contrary to my personal beliefs and worldview. So I think like sitting down and thinking about like, okay, like at some point he does need to be exposed to this, right? Because he has to be able to defend himself against it. Because at some point in life, he's going to be exposed to it. Like he's going to be an adult someday, or he's going to be a teenager or whatever. And he's going to have to, he's going to experience this stuff. And you don't want the experience, you don't want the first time they experience something like that to be out on their own when they have no experience with it, right? You want them to be prepared for it. But also, like, you want to take into consideration the maturity and the age of the kid. And, a 6-year-old or a 5-year-old doesn't have like the reasoning capabilities to understand like why something would be good or bad. I mean, they do, but they're so trusting of adults that if somebody just tells them this is what's good, this is what's moral, they're just going to believe them. That's just how children are designed for reasons, right? So I think there needs to be some aspect of keeping it away from them, maybe to a point in their life when they have the reasoning capabilities, and that will be dependent on the child and their maturity and how well they've, their intelligence or whatever, like how well they've matured. But at a certain point, you need to, I think, not in like a weird way, but like you do need to have them exposed to some of this stuff so that they know what the world is about, right? In an environment where you can explain to them why it is what they're seeing is wrong, and explain the reasons why we think the way that we do. I think just like generally, like, if left up to their own devices and, essentially if you let somebody else raise your kids, they're just going to have whatever morals of the person that raises them. So yeah, I don't know. Those are my general thoughts. I think it's just really
maybe then homeschooling is less about shielding kids from the outside world. Like a lot of people think it's about, creating somebody who is like not experienced, and maybe it's less about that and more about controlling how that stuff is presented to them. Mm-hmm. And that's how it's been for most of history. But if you send a 5-year-old off into the outside world with no framework, now he's just going to accept, the frame of how that information is presented to them, as opposed to you giving him that framework. And again, and I think that developing their framework is the important thing here. Okay. Developing like their moral framework. And that's why, like, I like my son to, I show him movies about like knights, right? Knights and chivalry and all that kind of stuff, because that's going to then give him that moral framework through which to see the world and experience these things, so that, now he knows right from wrong. And now he can filter all those things through the lens of the framework that I have given him, versus him going out completely raw with no framework as a young child and having to, and having no way of determining if something is good or not, because he has nothing to filter it through. And so, that's what the homeschooling thing is about. It's about, hey, maybe a 5-year-old actually isn't ready to just be out in the freaking world. Maybe they need to be 18 to be out in the world, because then they're going to have that framework and that development, as opposed to, you've got a freaking little kid and he's exposed to the Super Bowl halftime show, something super degenerate, disgusting. And that's probably the least degenerate, disgusting things kids are exposed to in public schools.
Mm-hmm.
So you give them now something which to view the outside world through. What's my moral framework? Honor, chivalry, honoring God, doing the right thing, avoiding mortal sin, all those sorts of things, and a million other things. And now they're going to be better prepared to handle those things and determine if something is good or not versus spiraling.
Yeah, I mean, people assume that I'm like a homeschool supremacist, and I'm like not at all. Like, I would much rather my kids like be taught by like a educated, qualified individual to teach them. But I just don't see that.
Definitely not us.
Yeah, for sure. Right?
You mean someone smart?
Yeah, I can teach them how to deadlift. But yeah, it's like I would obviously much rather that be the case, but it's like that's not an option when he's 5 or 6 years old. So at some point I would like for my kid to go to school. I don't know when that point is going to be. If it's high school or if it's junior high or something like that, it'll obviously depend on him. What I see in him and his development, stuff like that. Because I think there is huge limitations to homeschooling. For obvious reasons, it's the same limitations everybody always brings up. It's like, yeah, I see the same problems you do. It's not like I think that homeschooling is better. It's better in some ways, but it's not like it's better than like sending your kid to school as long as, what they're learning in school is, aligned with what I think they should be learning. So yeah, I mean, it's like, I think there is value in sending your kid to school and playing sports in school and dealing with things outside of like their parents being present. Obviously that there's growth involved in that, and that stuff's important. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think, like you said, like giving your child, you know how like in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, like every sitcom would have like special episodes when they would like tackle a social problem. If it's like, gay people or, like there's a new black guy working at the office or like, something like that. And it like the whole episode would be like about that. And then at the end, there would be like okay, here's the lesson we learned, guys. Like you said, when you like show your son, like, movies about knights, or like, cool stuff, right? I think like as a parent, like you have an obligation to have like those, okay, the movie's over. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about what was good, what was bad. And I think, more often than not, parents just don't do that part. Like they show them, what's going on in the world. They show them, media and stuff like that. But then they're not having the discussion of like, okay, well, like, let's talk about what we just watched. Because that's like a big part of, what, I don't know, like, what study it is or whatever, but, like basically, children up to a certain age basically form memories, like with what they watch, like as if they were the ones that did it, like almost 100% of children. And it's like still a pretty large amount of adults. Like if they watch a movie, like subconsciously they form a memory as if like it happened to them. That's why like media and movies and TV is like such a powerful propaganda tool. I think it's important to like realize that like when you're showing your kids stuff, like you have to like explain things behind it. Like you cannot just leave it up to whoever the producer was of the movie to, teach your child morals. Like you have to also do your role as a father.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it's almost like a lot of the movies are produced by people that are like really similar with really similar names. And I wonder if there's something to that. Yeah. And that brings up a good point too, is you have to explain why this thing is important, whatever. And as somebody who converted to Catholicism later in life, and kind of seeing it from the outside, that was something I noticed about the Catholic Church was there's a lot of people that, they fall away from the faith as they get older. And I think a lot of that is because I see these kids being told, this is what we do for Lent, or this is what we believe for this dogma or that. And the kids never really told why. And so they don't really have a good formation. And so they're just like, well, I don't know. That's just what mom told me. That's just what the priest said. And then so later on, they don't have a good reason for sticking with it. And then that's when they tend to rebel from it. And so you do have to teach them why this stuff is important or why we believe what we believe. I also think that there is a lot of fake social conceptions about what happens when you homeschool your kid. And again, that's kind of propaganda. Okay, like here's a great one: the propaganda of oh, well, women need to be in the workplace and they need to have a job because women used to just stay at home and they would get beat by their husbands if the dinner was cold. It's like you just heard that somewhere. Like
Right.
that's how do you know that that's true? That's just what you've seen in movies and stuff. That doesn't mean that that's really how it was. And it's not my experience at all that kids who are homeschooled end up rebelling like people think. And like, well, if you homeschool your kid, then they're going to go crazy when they go to college. That's not true. I know lots of people who are homeschooled that now they're very morally sound people, and they're much better off because of it. I can think of a lot of specific examples of people like that who were homeschooled. I mean, I even know a girl who was, raised in the Amish community for a large majority of her life. And, when her family left that community and, became, quote, normal or whatever you want to call it, she didn't go crazy and turn into some drug addict hooker or something. Like she's a very well morally formed person, just, experiencing the outside world through that moral formation and that lens. Mm-hmm. So I think it's BS. It's like the whole, if you don't let your kids do this or that, then they're going to do it. They're going to go crazy with it later. I don't think that's true. I think that's just something we've repeated culturally over the years.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I do think like sometimes there's just like bad apples. Like I think if you have like 10 kids, like you might have one screw up. Like that's just like the reality. Like you probably know somebody who like comes from a good family, has a bunch of very successful brothers and sisters who's like overdosed at 20, like that's, everybody probably knows somebody like that. I don't know, just have 12 kids. And if one of them, overdoses at 20, then I guess it is what it is. But,
well, it's so true. I mean, it is like that. Cause there are a lot of people who are really successful and they have a fucked up sibling, but that sibling was raised in the same environment and there was nothing really different about the way that they grew up. Like it's the same thing in my family. Like, my sister, the way that she lives her life and her opinions that she has are very different than mine, but we grew up in the exact same household and had more or less the same experiences. So no, I think you're right. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it with genetics and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I don't know what it is, but it seems like large families, there's always like one. There's always one kid.
Yeah. You just got to have as many as you can then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Let me pull up my notes here. Okay. What are some other questions that we had?
Take a fun one.
Oh, they're all fun, man. Do you want to do a fitness one?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if these are going to be fun. Okay. How much protein should I eat on a bulk?
Honestly, I don't really think that changes a whole lot from a bulk to a cut. I'm less of like a protein nerd than you would expect. I honestly don't think like hammering a bunch of protein is really that helpful. Like obviously the rule of thumb, like around a gram per pound of body weight is like, a pretty decent starting point, and then you just kind of adjust from there. I do some carb cycling with people like when they're on a cut, and I think, I'll increase their protein on like a low carb day just to like make sure they're not eating like 1,200 calories or something. But generally, I don't really hammer people with like a ton of protein, like 300 plus grams of protein just feels like to me, just like a really expensive way to pretty much end up with the same outcome at the end. It's hard to digest that much protein. A lot of people struggle eating that much protein. You can eat a lot more peanut butter and jellies than you can like chicken, right? So, if you're really trying to gain weight, you're probably going to hit your protein needs without trying very hard. If you're like hammering protein, that's like, you could have filled up that same amount of like volume of food that you put inside your body with way more calories if it was carbs. So I don't know, like generally a gram per pound. And if somebody needs a little bit more or a little bit less, just depending on the outcome, but people that do like 1.5 or 2 grams, I just don't see the value in it, to be honest with you. A lot of people do it, especially like natty guys for some reason think like they just need to like hammer protein. So I don't know. I'm not like a big protein nerd. Like protein's obviously important, but guys make phenomenal gains. Like I eat like pretty low protein right now, to be honest with you. Like for like the last year, I'm probably not even close to the 1 gram per pound of body weight. You know, I'm probably lucky to get 150 to 180 grams of protein a day. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I would say typically somewhere between zero point 0.8 and 1 gram per pound of body weight. Because again, like we talked about this, muscle tissue accrual or protein synthesis, whatever you want to call it, is going to be rate limited no matter what. So more isn't going to yield more muscle mass. I mean, you can only build, what is it, like a quarter or a gram of muscle a day or something like that. So, what's the actual protein requirement to make that happen? It's not very much. The other consideration too is, like you said, that's going to take away stomach volume from being able to eat carbohydrates, which is really going to be our growth lever, because that's going to be, what causes you to produce insulin and then drive that into the muscle cell, and then also be able to increase our calorie intake that way. And so that's kind of how I view the entire macro distribution. It's like we have a set amount of protein; those are our building blocks. We have a set amount of fat, and those are what we use to, synthesize hormones, absorb vitamins, and those sorts of things. And the rest is carbs, and that's what we use for leverage. I will say, like maybe I'll increase the protein a little bit when we're doing less carbohydrates, because carbohydrates are protein sparing. And so when we're eating less carbohydrates, we need a little bit more protein to make up for it. And this is a problem that you see with like these ketogenic and carnivore diets is, well, your body's going to maintain its blood sugar whether you like it or not. And if you're not eating carbohydrates, what's it going to use to create that blood sugar? Proteins, whether that's protein that you eat or it's going to autophagy, it's going to use your muscle cells. And so, we increase that protein availability. But if you're eating, let's say, a keto or carnivore diet and you have zero carbohydrates, you have to like double your protein intake so that your body doesn't start eating itself. And it's like, it's expensive. We have digestive problems. We have, some people would say potentially renal problems and all these other things, and increased, urea nitrogen and all these other issues that might come. And then, it's expensive. And it's like, a lot of people like to do the carnivore thing because I think it's like it's a cultural thing. It's a fad or whatever. But yeah, I would agree, like somewhere between 0.8 and a gram per pound. But I think people definitely overdo it, and they don't realize like food actually isn't that great of food itself isn't really a stimulus for muscle growth, right? Because if I don't train, but I eat a lot of food, I don't really grow any muscle, I get fat. So the food isn't the stimulus, the training is the stimulus. And I just have to give it enough food to allow that stimulus to happen, which is from the training.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. A lot of people have this, I don't know. They have like an appeal to like the carnivore diet because they're like, who wouldn't want to eat bacon and steak all day long? It's like, that's what men do.
I really don't either, man. I could drink like Jamba Juice smoothies every day for my entire life and be happy.
Literally. Yeah. Yep.
But I think, it is. Well, and also I think another thing is that people like to think they have a secret. They like to belong to a team and a tribe. And the keto/carnivore thing allows them to feel like they have some kind of secret other people don't, and they have some kind of team that they're a part of. Yeah. And that's what it comes. And it's the same thing with CrossFit or anything else. It's just like you become a part of some kind of cult, and that becomes a part of your identity. And that's why, and this, like people get so emotional about their training and about their diet because it's a part of their identity. Like if I were to tell you, like, you tell me you like a certain TV show, and I'm like, yeah, I didn't really like that show. And you're like, whatever. But if you're like, I eat carnivore, and I'm like, yeah, I don't really like carnivore. It's like offensive to people. Like they get emotional about it because it's part of their identity. It's like you're attacking who they are. And so I think that's what that stuff comes down to. Like, yeah, maybe there's some efficacy to it. Maybe it works for you a little bit. But I think it's less about the science behind it. And it's more about like, you just have this like attachment because it makes you feel like that's part of who you are. And that's why it's so huge for you.
Yeah.
All right. Next question here. All right. Does owning a gun give a man a false sense of capability/security?
Yeah. I think a lot of times it does. I mean, obviously it does give you more capabilities and security. But a lot of people will use that as an excuse to like not be physically capable or physically strong. And, like it goes without saying, but a gun is not like a applicable tool for every situation, and probably will never be like an applicable tool in your real life. Like the majority of people will probably never have to use a gun in real life. So if that's like your only tool that you have, you're probably, you're not in a good position to, like be an actual functional human. But yeah, a lot of people like will only train, shooting ability, which is cool. That's fine. I think shooting ability is cool. That's a good skill to have. It's probably a skill you'll never need, more than likely, right? I mean, similarly to like me being able to deadlift a certain amount of weight, it's probably a skill I'll never need. I think it's cool, so I train it. But it's not like I neglect other functional things. It's not like I'm like, oh, I don't need to know how to do first aid. Like I can deadlift 700. Like that would be a retarded thing to say. So it's just as retarded to like not be physically capable just because you have a gun.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I also think too, from my perspective as somebody who trains with firearms, that a lot of people have a gun and have no idea how to employ it. And they don't understand how difficult it actually is to employ a gun in a self-defense situation. And so it does give people a false sense of security. Like, well, I have a gun on me. And so therefore I'm safe. Frankly, a lot of people, it makes them less safe because they're more likely to shoot a bystander themselves. I mean, that's one of the arguments against guns in general is like, statistically, the gun is more likely to hurt you than somebody else, than a bad guy. And that is true. And obviously there's statistics about suicide and murder and stuff like that in there. But even regardless, if you don't train with that weapon, it's essentially useless. I mean, it is so hard to shoot, it's hard to shoot a handgun when you're not under duress, let alone when there's somebody else running at you with a knife or shooting at you or something like that. Yeah. And so, yeah, there's so many people that, they have a gun and they don't train with it. And it's just, you're creating more of a liability than anything. So, yeah, agreed there.
We have a recent in the news thing about a guy shooting himself and somebody attacking him. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, Chud the Builder?
Yeah.
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 What happened there? He had his arm in the way or something, or
I don't know how he ended up shooting himself. He also didn't kill the guy, but
I think he hit the guy in the head thow.
Maybe. Yeah, but he said he didn't have like life-threatening injuries or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe grazed him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example. And then, well, not only training, but also knowing when is appropriate to use that weapon.
Yeah.
Because again, a lot of people, they aren't mentally prepared for like, when should I employ this thing? How should I kind of just act in my daily life when I carry? Because there are people that they'll pull that gun out when they shouldn't pull that gun out. And now they're introducing a weapon into something that wasn't something that required a weapon. And now you're putting yourself at legal risk.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's like, you should have the confidence to be able to defend yourself, but you shouldn't be putting yourself in a situation to need to. Whereas like, with him specifically, obviously, like regardless of if you, agree with anything he said or disagree with what he said, he is clearly putting himself to make content in dangerous situations. He's like rage baiting people in real life who probably lack self-control and can typically be violent. So it's like, what do you think the eventual outcome of like what you're doing is going to be? Is like probably a violent altercation. And then he's like, well, I'll just shoot the guy. I was like, well, yeah, now you're probably in prison.
Yeah, which is what it's looked like is going to happen with that guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, all right, let's do just one more. How can I naturally increase my testosterone levels? Well, that's a big one. You want to kick that one off? Or you want me to?
Yeah, you can inject it. But I mean, obviously, like lifestyle changes is going to have like the biggest impact, I would say. Obviously, like working out and eating like a balanced, healthy diet. Not being in like a caloric deficit. Getting good sleep, quality sleep, and enough of it. Getting ample amount of sunlight. Not like, like weird soul bra stuff, but like probably getting sun is probably valuable. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if like being in an environment is like, like that, like surrounding yourself with like high T people. I don't know if that like makes a huge difference. but it probably makes a small difference. I don't know. Anything that you really do isn't going to make a huge difference. It's not going to dramatically change your testosterone production. Like, let's say something made a 10% difference, like, getting more sun every day made a 10% difference. That's 10% sounds like a lot, but if you have like a 500 test level and it goes from 500 to 550, that's not a difference that you would feel, right? Like, you can feel going from 500 to 1,000, but you can't feel going from 500 to 550. So, like, making a significant difference in your testosterone levels, for the majority of people, there's probably nothing that you could do.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's a big difference between optimizing your testosterone levels with all these little lifestyle things and then trying to fix a medical issue like hypogonadism by, drinking raw milk and going out in the sun. I think that these are very two stark things. And if maybe there is one thing that's holding your testosterone levels back. Like maybe there's some big glaring thing, like you're super fat and your lifestyle totally sucks and you turn everything around and your test levels go up to something decent. I've seen that happen. But when it comes to like optimizing on that kind of stuff, my whole thing is like, okay, or even if you're hypogonadal, it's like you have two options. You can either spend your entire life being super neurotic about everything that you do so that you can maybe hold on to a decent testosterone level for longer, right? Or you could just get on TRT and not have to worry about it. Because the reality is that like our environment is so toxic, you accrue so much endocrine damage over the years that it's like, yeah, how much are you really going to increase it? The analogy that I use is like, hey, if you were on the moon or something, like you need an oxygen pack to survive on the moon. Well, this environment that we're in is just so toxic and so screwed up that no matter what you do, unless you go live in the Himalayas away from civilization completely, and even probably still then, you're just going to be in this nasty environment no matter what. And so maybe a medical intervention is going to be the easier route. And, I think a lot of people are afraid to say that, but there are some people that are coming out that are saying like, hey, I actually recommend that everybody gets on TRT just because look, having low testosterone levels is super unhealthy for you. And it's way less healthy for you than just injecting testosterone and dealing with those side effects. So, what's a bigger health risk, taking 100 milligrams of test and be at 800, or not taking any test and being at 200 and hovering between 2 and 3 and being stressed out all the time and having all this visceral fat? It's like, at some point, it's like, just bite the bullet. And then this is a whole nother thing to get into the weeds too, but like what really is natural? What do you consider natural? And I think that in itself is a stupid way to categorize things, natural versus not natural. I don't think that it really exists.
Yeah, I think there's like some big issues with the like TRT or the obsession with like your test levels. Like obviously we have in modern life a lot of things that will cause you to have low test levels. But the obsession with like what the number is on the test, I think there's a lot of really glaring issues with that. And like obviously one of the biggest ones is like your testosterone isn't like a flat line all the time. Like when you test it, at a certain time of day, today after a really good night of sleep versus next week at a different time of day after a poor night of sleep, it's going to look very different. That doesn't mean you have like different test levels this week versus next week. I mean, you do, but did it like dramatically change anything about you? Probably not. And the other thing is like, it doesn't necessarily, like somebody could feel very, very good at 800 tests and somebody could feel really bad at 1100 or, even lower. Somebody could feel really good at 500, and they perform well, they recover well, they build muscle. Okay. So like, just like worrying about like what the number says, there's like a weird obsession with that I don't really agree with. Should be focusing on like how you feel. Like if somebody said like, how can I naturally increase my energy levels? Well, you wouldn't look down on somebody for like using caffeine, right? I mean, like maybe some people would, but I mean, I wouldn't. But that would be like an unnatural way of increasing your energy levels, like temporarily. But yeah, so it's like, I don't know, like if you're going to address a symptom, which is like for whatever your symptoms are for low T, it doesn't really matter what the number is. Like it doesn't matter if it's 300 or 400 or 500 or 600. If increasing your test fixes those symptoms, then, you've done what you wanted to do. I mean, you've fixed that issue. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's important to, optimize as much of your life as you can. And, being married to this idea of being a super natty, I mean, to me is just silly. I mean, I think there's really, what are you getting out of it other than like winning a moral argument? Like,
yeah, I agree. And I also am totally in agreement with you on the symptomology thing. Okay. Like the number itself doesn't matter because there are so many different factors that are going to play out of what your symptoms are. And so it's like, okay, well, I would ask this guy, like, why do you want to increase your testosterone levels? Like, what are you hoping to get out of it? Do you have hypogonadal symptoms? And yes, there are people who have a 400 test level or even a 300 that feel awesome, and they are actually able to build as much muscle mass as somebody that has 1,000. We see that all the time with natural athletes. And then there are people that are 800 and they have low symptoms. I would say that getting your testosterone levels tested is it's just another clue. It's another data point. Hey, I have these symptoms. Let's get my testosterone looked at. Is that potentially the problem? If the testosterone level is low, then now we can look in that direction. If the testosterone level is not low, well, maybe that's not the problem then. And so, because again, like it's just like anything, like thyroid hormone is a great example. Some people need 25 micrograms of T3 for replacement. And then there are 110-pound girls that need 75 micrograms of T3 to be normal. And so there's such a vast difference in individual physiology because it's not just the blood level of the hormone, it's what that hormone is doing in your body. And it's this whole cascade of effects. You have the androgen receptor, and then you have the CAG repeats of the androgen receptor, and you have estradiol, and you have sex hormone binding globulin, and all these different things that are going to play a role in what that level actually means in context. And so shooting for a certain level is so stupid and so silly. And not only that, but yeah, your levels are fluctuating all the time. I mean, I've seen people get a lab test done, their level was 300, and they get it tested again, 72 hours later, and it's 750. Mm-hmm. And so you really need a couple data points. But yeah, it's like this obsession with the lab numbers is it's nonsense.
Yeah, like the amount of testosterone you have floating around in your blood, doesn't mean anything because it's obviously not doing anything in the blood, right? It's when it attaches. So, but we can't test like your testosterone levels in tissue, right? So it's like the best that we have is in your blood, and it's not really a good marker. So, you can measure trend lines, maybe that would be like a useful thing for that number. But aside from that, it's not, other than getting diagnosed, I guess, for TRT.
And there's also a balance because, your DHT offsets estrogen. So maybe it's not even so much the total number that's the problem. Maybe it's the balance of that with some other hormone. So right. It is. It's such a nuanced thing that you really have to do it correctly. And the unfortunate thing is that most guys will go to their general practitioner and they'll say, hey, doc, I think my test is low. And maybe the doctor will test total testosterone. And that's the only thing. And I do a lot of TRT consults. And that's something that people can do. I'm not trying to plug my services or whatever, but one of the things that I do is these TRT consults where I show them, hey, these are exactly the labs we need to get. Here's where you go to get them. I have a link and everything, and we build out the sheet for you and get your labs tested, and I help you interpret them. That way, when you do go to a doctor to potentially get on TRT, you're armed with so much more information than just going to the doctor and they say, oh, you're in range, you're at 300, but you have all these problems. I've never seen it work out with a GP. I've never seen anybody go, or very rarely seen anybody go to just their regular family doctor and they diagnose low T and they put the person on a good TRT regimen. It's like a 1 in a million shot. So there's too much to it to just say, oh, I'm going to go to my doctor and just get my T level checked.
Yep. Yeah. It's like that with like almost every blood test. It's like they do such like a basic panel that like when there is an issue, like you can't dig any deeper to figure out like what it is that's going on. Like how many times do you have somebody that sends you blood work that came from their general practitioner, and it's like you have to go get more blood work. Like I can't tell anything from this. Like we got one number that's jacked up, and I don't know why. There's nothing I can do to tell you anything more. Here's a link to go order your own blood work because that's what we need.
Yeah, the GP is basically a gatekeeper for the specialties, and I'm not trying to say doctors don't know anything, but if you're a family medicine doctor or internal medicine, whatever they call it, you're a general practitioner. Basically your job is to know a little bit about a lot of things, and so they're just looking to see what the lab flags. And if the lab flags something, they just send you to the relevant specialist, right?
Right.
And that's kind of the problem. So no, I totally agree. And I always tell guys like, hey, if you're interested in checking out your testosterone levels, look, the lab panel that I have guys get, it's like $400, but it's extremely comprehensive. It's going to show us everything and put us in the right direction. So you're going to save 6 months worth of time figuring this out on your own. It's also going to give us insights into other stuff that we can help optimize with training and supplementation. Like we're going to look at lipids, all these other blood markers, so we can like get things fixed right away. And now you're going to have this baseline for all of your labs. And then the things that are iffy that we need to fix, we could just retest those things down the road. Because if somebody's got, I don't know, great blood work for section A for lipids or something, but this other thing is messed up, well, we don't need to necessarily test that other thing down the road. So it's not like every time we get labs, it's $400. It's
right.
We do this big comprehensive one right now, and then we just start focusing on the things that we need to improve. And it's such a better option than going to your doctor and getting a CBC and a CMP, which is going to tell us fucking nothing about you.
Right. Yep. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, we've been on for quite a while, man. So that should wrap it up. But we touched on a lot of things, touched on training, touched on hormones, fatherhood, raising kids. So I think this kind of, hit everything that our demographic is interested in. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome job.
So where can people find you if they want to check out your YouTube or your Instagram?
Probably Instagram would just be Stronghold Muscle. I don't really have YouTube set up right now, so Instagram would be the main way. And I just post a lot of strongman type stuff, a lot of fatherhood type stuff, a lot of training, my clients' training, stuff like that. Mostly on Instagram.
Right on. Cool. Well, I'll put the link to that in the description, and people can check you out.
Awesome. Thank you, Randy.
All right. Talk to you later, man.
All right, man.